She stood at the altar, alone, the dress perfect, the guests waiting, but the groom gone without a word, just vanished. And then, just when her world shattered, a man stepped forward, not the one she loved, his brother, older, colder, untouchable. And he said 5 words that would change everything. "I'll marry you instead." What began as a desperate rescue became something no one saw coming. A secret, a storm, and a love born not from fairy tales, but from fire. This isn't just a romance. It's a reckoning. And once you hear how it ends, you'll never forget how it began. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The ivory dress, the string quartet, warming up outside the chairs, neatly arranged under the arbor at Willow Pine's vineyard. Every detail had been curated for perfection. Madison Blake, 29, stood alone in the bridal suite, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the antique earrings her grandmother had gifted her just days before her passing. Her best friend Grace paced nearby, phone glued to her ear. "Still nothing," Grace said, lowering her phone with a haunted look. "He's not answering." Voicemail again. A sick feeling churned in Madison's stomach. Caleb had been distant all week. His text delayed, his voice strained, his kisses quick and cold. She'd brushed it off as nerves. Cold feet, everyone had said. But now she knew. Something was wrong. The knock at the door made both women jump. Grace raced to open it, her eyes flickering with hope. But it wasn't Caleb. It was his older brother. Logan Prescott stepped into the room like a thundercloud in a suit. 35, quiet, private, and powerful. A man who had always remained on the edge of family events, never rude, but always distant. He looked sharp in a tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair slicked back, his steel gray eyes unreadable. "Where is he?" Madison's voice cracked her stomach, hollowing out. Logan shut the door behind him with slow finality. "He's not coming," he said evenly, holding out his phone. On the screen, a message from Caleb blinked back. "I can't do this. Tell her I'm sorry." The room fell into silence. The silence before the bottom drops out of your world. Madison's knees buckled slightly. Grace rushed to her side, furious. He left her. What kind of man? But Madison barely heard. All the months of planning the dreams, the belief that Caleb loved her, all of it unraveled in one cruel instant. She looked at Logan, desperate for something. Answers, reassurance, anything. "What do I do?" she whispered. Logan's gaze stayed locked on her. He stepped forward with a steadiness that contrasted sharply with her collapsing reality. "You don't have to tell anyone yet," he said, voice low but firm. "There's another option." Grace narrowed her eyes. "If you're about to suggest damage control, I'll marry you," Logan said. The words were like a lightning strike. Madison blinked. "What? Right now? Right here? Everyone's waiting. The minister, the guests, the music's about to start." He paused. "I can save you from the headlines, the questions, the pity, and I can make sure the Prescott name doesn't go down in flames today." "This is insane," Grace snapped. "She doesn't even like you." But Madison's eyes stayed on Logan. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't trying to charm her like Caleb had always done. His face was still, his eyes intense. Why, she asked, barely able to get the word out. Logan took a breath. Because what Caleb did, it's shameful. And because he stopped, emotion flickering across his face before vanishing. Because it's the right thing to do. Silence again. Except this time it hummed with possibility. Logan stepped closer. It would be a temporary arrangement. 1 year. A paper marriage. No obligations beyond appearances. You'd have freedom. And you wouldn't have to face 200 guests and explain why the groom bailed. Madison felt herself being pulled toward the unthinkable. Toward something different from heartbreak. Something terrifying. But solid. "And if I say yes?" she asked quietly. "We walk down the aisle," he said, "and no one has to know the truth." Madison glanced at Grace, whose jaw had practically dropped. "You can't be considering this." But Madison's heart was pounding. Not from fear. From something else. Something alive. Something that had flickered inside her only once before. Back when Logan had complimented her painting at last year's family brunch. The only real thing he'd ever said to her. She turned back to Logan. "Separate rooms?" she asked. He nodded. "Of course. Freedom to keep my work, my art, my friends. Yes." She took a breath that shook her entire body. Then she extended her hand. Okay, she said. Let's do it. Logan took her hand, his grip warm, steady. You won't regret this, he murmured. But as the door opened and the wedding march began to play, Madison couldn't help but wonder, was she making the biggest mistake of her life, or stepping into the only truth that had been waiting for her all along? The sun filtered through the white canopy over Willow Pine's vineyard as the guests rose from their seats. A hush swept through the crowd when they saw the groom wasn't Caleb Prescott, but Logan, the reclusive older brother known more for mergers and boardrooms than love and laughter. Madison walked down the aisle, her hand shaking slightly in her bouquet of peonies and lavender. Her dress, once a dream stitched in lace, now felt like a costume in someone else's drama. But her eyes, those stayed locked on Logan, who stood still at the altar, his gray eyes holding her like a lifeline. And when the minister asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" Madison answered strong and clear, "I give myself." A flicker of surprise crossed Logan's face. Admiration, even. The vows passed like a blur, words of devotion meant for a future she never imagined. When the moment came for the ring, Logan reached into his pocket and revealed a stunning sapphire band surrounded by delicate diamonds. It was not the one Caleb had picked. It was better, unique, deep, like him. "You may now kiss the bride," the minister announced. Madison froze. That part hadn't been discussed. Logan leaned in slowly, his hand gently cradling her cheek. "May I?" he whispered so low, only she could hear. She gave the slightest nod. His lips brushed hers, soft, almost reverent. It was supposed to be a formality. Instead, it stirred something ancient. Something real. When they pulled apart, scattered applause erupted. Guests smiled, whispering, "Now that makes sense." As if they'd seen a different story than the one Madison thought she was living. Later at the reception, Logan never left her side. His hand rested lightly at the small of her back as they greeted well-wishers. He played the part of the groom perfectly. Gracious, steady, charismatic. The perfect Prescott. But behind the mask, there was something else. Something more watchful. Protective. Over wine and a forced smile, Madison leaned toward him. "You're quite the actor." "Who says I'm acting?" he said, his eyes scanning her face. The words lodged in her chest like a secret. They danced once. Just once. Her hands rested against the firmness of his chest. His touch was confident but careful, like he knew exactly how to hold her without caging her in. The music swirled, but neither of them spoke. Their eyes said enough. Then came the moment she hadn't prepared for. Logan, a voice cut through the crowd like a razor. Richard Prescott, their father, sharp-suited, silver-haired, and ice-cold Richard, approached like royalty, surveying the throne room. "Well," he said with a half-smirk, "when I heard Caleb skipped out, I assumed you'd canceled everything. Not this." Madison's spine stiffened. Logan simply nodded. "We adapted." Richard's eyes landed on Madison. "So it's Mrs. Prescott now," he said, amused. "Quite the upgrade." "Still Madison," she replied evenly. "And I think I'm the lucky one." The tension between Logan and Richard crackled like static. "We'll talk," Richard said, not unkindly. "At the office?" "Tomorrow." "We'll be away," Logan replied coolly. "Honeymoon?" "Honeymoon." Madison turned to him. "That wasn't in our deal." Logan tilted his head slightly, his voice dropping. "It's expected. Keeps questions at bay. We can use the lakehouse, secluded, separate rooms, if you'd prefer." Something in the way he said that last part made her pulse spike. She nodded. "All right." By midnight, the toasts were over. The cake was cut. The guests were drunk on champagne and love stories they didn't fully understand. Instead of Caleb's honeymoon suite, Logan drove Madison through the city lights to his penthouse overlooking Central Park. "Home sweet home," he said dryly as they stepped inside. It was sleek and modern masculine, but not cold. And the art. It wasn't corporate. It was emotional. Bold, experimental pieces lined the walls. Some from emerging artists she recognized instantly. "You have good taste," she murmured. He glanced at her. "I pay attention to what matters." He showed her to the guest suite. Soft colors, plush sheets, a city view worth millions. Her suitcases were already there, packed for a different life. They stood awkwardly for a moment. "We should talk," Logan said, lingering in the doorway. "I've prepared something, contracts, terms." Romantic, she replied with a small, bitter smile. He didn't flinch. This isn't romance. It's reality. For now. She crossed her arms. So separate lives, just appearances. He nodded. Unless you change your mind. The suggestion simmered in the air, heavy, heated. Madison blinked. Good night, Logan. He hesitated, then turned. Good night, Madison. She waited until the door closed, then slipped out of the dress, hung it in the back of the closet, and changed into a silk robe. Her head hit the pillow, but sleep wouldn't come. Too many questions. Why had Logan stepped in? Why had he risked everything? For her. Was this really just honor, or was there more he wasn't saying? At 3 a.m., she crept barefoot through the penthouse, seeking water. As she reached the kitchen, a voice spoke from the dark. Couldn't sleep either. Logan sat at the island, shirtless, a glass of scotch in one hand. The city lights bathed his body in silver, muscular, calm, brooding. I was thirsty, she whispered. He rose, took the glass from her hand, and filled it. Their fingers brushed. A current sparked. Today was harder than I expected, he admitted, voice low. You saved me from a disaster, she said. He didn't look away. Maybe I just saved myself. The moment thickened. She wanted to ask what that meant. But instead, she retreated to her room, clutching the glass to her chest like armor. In the silence, one truth echoed louder than all the others. This was not just a paper marriage. Not anymore. 3 days later, a sleek black SUV wound its way through winding forest roads just north of the Catskills, kicking up dust as it approached a modern glass and stone retreat nestled beside a quiet lake. Logan Prescott cut the engine, glancing at Madison in the passenger seat. We're here. Madison blinked in disbelief. You designed this place. He nodded, every inch. She stepped out and turned slowly. The lakehouse didn't scream billionaire. It whispered soul. Natural wood beams, soaring windows, wildflowers along the path. Intentional, like every decision Logan made. Inside, the space was warm and open. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the lake like a living painting. The kitchen gleamed with brushed copper and reclaimed wood. A fireplace dominated the living area, stacked with neatly cut firewood. And the silence? It wasn't awkward. It was peace. No staff, she asked, still drinking in the place. Just us, he said, already loosening his tie. That okay with you? Madison gave a small smile. More than okay. After a lunch, Logan cooked himself. Grilled salmon and rosemary potatoes. They took a walk through the woods. Madison hadn't felt this grounded in weeks. As they rounded a trail that opened to a breathtaking overlook of the water, she asked, why here? He paused. My mom brought me here as a kid, before the divorce, before the pressure. What happened? My father sold it, said it wasn't useful. She frowned. And you bought it back. The day I made my first million. The vulnerability in his voice startled her. The Logan she'd known in passing at family gatherings had always been composed, untouchable. Now he was just a man with scars. Later that afternoon, he led her to a detached studio nestled among the trees. Wait, you paint? She asked, stepping inside. Badly, he admitted, scratching the back of his neck. But it helps me think. She walked to the canvas he had turned toward the wall. Can I? He hesitated, then nodded. She turned the painting and gasped. The strokes were bold, abstract. Deep blues and blacks crashed against streaks of gold. It wasn't technical, but it felt raw, searching. It's honest, she said softly. Beautiful, even. Logan stared at her for a moment. You feel things deeply, don't you? So do you, she replied. They stood in silence, the energy between them, rising like pressure before a storm. And then the first raindrop hit the window. Storm's here, he said, glancing out as fat droplets began to fall fast and hard. Madison laughed. Perfect timing. Run, he asked, grabbing a coat from the hook. They sprinted back to the house, rain soaking through their clothes. By the time they reached the porch, they were drenched and breathless. She turned to him, laughing. You look like you fell in the lake. And you don't. He grinned and shook his head like a dog spraying water everywhere. Hey! She shrieked, swatting at him. Logan, in the next moment, he grabbed her wrist. Not harshly, just enough to stop her movement. Her breath caught. They froze, eyes locked. Rain still dripped from their hair. His white shirt clung to every muscle. Her sundress was plastered to her skin. The laughter faded, replaced by something else. Heat, need, She looked up his face inches from hers and felt her stomach twist in the best possible way. "We should go inside," he said, his voice hoarse. Inside, they took separate showers. She found him later in the living room, wearing a soft gray Henley and faded jeans, building a fire. "Comfortable?" he asked, glancing up. She nodded, drying her hair with a towel. "More than I expected to be." He sat beside her on the thick rug, the crackle of fire wrapping around them like a blanket. For a while they didn't speak, just shared the silence. Then he said, "You surprised me, you know." "How?" "Back at the altar, you didn't panic. You didn't fall apart." "I wanted to," she admitted. "But then, you showed up." He met her eyes. "I didn't expect to feel what I felt when I saw you in that dress." She exhaled slowly. "Logan." "Don't worry," he said gently. "I know what this is. A temporary arrangement. You didn't ask for any of this. Neither did you." He looked into the fire. "But I'm glad I was there." Lightning lit the windows. A crash of thunder followed. She jumped. He turned to her, arms instinctively wrapping around her. "You okay?" She nodded, but didn't pull away. "Why did you really do it?" she asked. "Marry me." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I've wanted to, for longer than I'd ever admit." She stared at him. "You saw my paintings at the engagement party," he continued, "but I saw yours at that gallery downtown. You were using a pseudonym. I knew it was you. The colors, the brushwork. It was you. I've watched your career, your work from afar." Her breath caught. "Why didn't you say something?" He looked pained. "Because you were Caleb's, and I'm not the guy who steals someone else's dream." Another crack of thunder. She didn't move away. "I'm not his anymore," she whispered. When he leaned in this time, she didn't stop him. The kiss was gentle at first, searching, testing. Then it deepened, fueled by all the things they hadn't said. His hand slid up her arms, her neck into her damp hair. She clung to him like he was the only solid thing in her world. And maybe, just maybe, he was. Hours later, curled up together on the couch, Logan whispered into her hair, "This changes everything." She smiled, eyes closed, heartbeat steady. "I hope so." The lake house had felt like another world. Now, as the helicopter descended toward the private rooftop of Logan's Manhattan penthouse, Madison watched the skyline rise to meet them like a wave. Her hand gripped his, tightly reluctant to leave the peace they had found among trees, storms, and silence. Back to reality. Back to the city that never stopped watching. "Lunch at the penthouse," Logan said gently. "Then I have meetings. The Tokyo acquisition's on edge again." She nodded. "I'll go work in the studio." The penthouse was immaculate as always, almost too perfect. After the warmth of the lake house, its polished steel and marble surfaces felt sterile. But her heart still hummed with the memory of their nights by the fire, their laughter echoing in the trees, the way he'd whispered her name when no one else could hear. She was about to unpack when a soft voice called from the kitchen. "Mrs. Prescott, a delivery arrived while you were away." Madison turned to find Mrs. Hughes, the housekeeper, setting a massive bouquet of exotic orchids on the counter, the air filled with their heavy, sweet scent. There was a note. She opened it. "Madison, I made a mistake. Please meet me. I need to explain everything. Caleb." Her chest tightened. Logan walked in just as she was reading it. His face darkened immediately. "He sent you flowers." She nodded, the words caught in her throat. Logan didn't raise his voice, didn't flinch, but his jaw clenched like a trap. "You don't owe me an explanation," he said quietly. "He was your fiancé." She stepped toward him. "I didn't ask for this." "I know." And just like that, he turned and walked into his office. The door clicked shut behind him. The air in the penthouse turned cold. Without a word, Madison picked up the vase and dumped the orchids into the trash. That night she couldn't paint. She tried, but every brushstroke felt forced. So she paced and wondered. What did Caleb want to explain? And why now? She didn't love him anymore. That was clear. But closure had a gravity she couldn't ignore. The next day at 1 p.m., she walked to their spot, a quiet bench in Riverside Park beneath a willow tree. Caleb was already there, dressed in a pressed blazer, a shadow of his former golden boy self. "Thanks for coming," he said, rising to greet her. She sat without shaking his hand. "Make it quick. I panicked that day," he began. "But not because of you. Because of Logan." She frowned. "What?" Caleb leaned forward. "I found out he had been watching you for years, following your career. He had your paintings. He sent someone to track you." "You're lying," she snapped. "I have proof. He pulled out a folder. Documents, photos, email exchanges. He's been obsessed with you since before we even met. Madison stared at the pages. Her work. Her shows. Her name circled in red. A heat rose in her chest. Not love. Betrayal. She stood. I need time. That night, Logan returned home late from meetings. His hair tousled, his tie loosened. He froze when he saw her standing at the door. We need to talk, she said. He didn't speak, just nodded. Did you follow me before we met, she asked. He hesitated. Yes. Did you hire someone? He nodded. I wanted to make sure you were safe. Caleb. He has a pattern with women. I was trying to protect you. And your collection of my work. The studio you built before the wedding. He stepped closer. Yes. I saw your gallery pieces 3 years ago. I was captivated. Madison's voice trembled. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were engaged to my brother. I didn't want to ruin what you had. Or because you wanted to control what came next. That stung. Logan took a breath, his composure slipping. This wasn't manipulation, Madison. It was love. Unspoken, yes, maybe even cowardly. But never calculated to hurt you. I need space, she whispered. He nodded once. I'll have my driver take you in the morning. The next day, Madison left the towering heights of the penthouse behind and returned to her grandmother's old brownstone in Brooklyn. Dust-covered furniture, peeling paint. But it was hers. And it was quiet. She painted for hours, attacking canvases like they had wronged her. And still her heart ached. On the third day, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Richard Prescott standing in a crisp navy suit, holding a slim leather folder. May I come in, he asked. Madison hesitated, then stepped aside. You deserve to know the truth, Richard said, settling into the faded armchair. He opened the folder. Inside, receipts, documents, emails. Liam lied. Repeatedly. He cheated on you during your entire engagement. She flinched. Why are you telling me this? Because Logan didn't lie. He handed her another item, a worn leather journal. His Richard said, I found it open on his desk, page 47. Madison turned to the page, saw her again today. She was describing color theory to a buyer like it was music. She doesn't know I'm listening. But I could listen forever. Page after page of confessions, admiration, longing, guilt, and love, real love. Her hand trembled. Richard stood to leave. One more thing, he said. Caleb didn't leave you because of Logan. I paid him $5 million to disappear. Madison's eyes widened. I thought you were chasing the Prescott name, Richard admitted. I was wrong. He tipped his head and left her alone with the journal. The storm outside had passed, but a new storm churned inside her. What now? The journal sat in Madison's lap, worn leather warm from her hands, its pages fluttering gently as a breeze blew in through the open window. Outside, Brooklyn bustled on like nothing had happened. But inside her grandmother's brownstone, time had paused. She had read Logan's words a dozen times. Every line bled honesty, not calculation. The entries stretched back 3 years. Notes on her gallery exhibits, reflections on her work, quiet observations of her presence at family events. She sees the world in color, even when it's turned gray. She doesn't know, I notice her hand always shakes when she speaks in public. I would never be worthy of her, not as I am, but I'd give anything to try. These weren't the words of a manipulator. They were the words of a man who had loved in silence. Still, he had hired someone. He had kept secrets. Her heart was torn between awe and betrayal. When her phone buzzed, she jumped. It was a message from Lily. Hey, you okay? Rumor mill's going nuts. Chandler Gala is tonight. Everyone's expecting drama. You going? Madison hesitated, then called. I need a dress, she said. Lily didn't miss a beat. On it. That evening, the Metropolitan Museum of Art glittered with Manhattan's elite. Limos lined the curb. Photographers snapped away as celebrities and CEOs poured in under strings of lights. Inside the gala was a cascade of champagne shimmering gowns and whispers about the mysterious marriage of Logan Prescott. Madison entered alone. Every head turned. She wore midnight blue, the color of Logan's painting. Her skin glowed against the silk. Her grandmother's pearl earrings caught the light as she moved. People whispered. Some gasped. But she only had eyes for one man. Across the room, Logan stood in a black tuxedo, alone near a Roman sculpture, a glass of untouched scotch in hand. He looked like stone himself, hollowed out, beautiful but distant. Until he saw her, for a moment the noise of the room vanished. His eyes widened. Hope bloomed in his face like dawn. "Madison," he breathed when she approached. "You came." "I had to," she said softly. "We need to talk." Before she could say more, a too familiar voice cut in. "You look stunning, Caleb." He stepped between them, his smile polished. His hand brushed Madison's elbow. She pulled away. "I'm here with my husband, Caleb." Logan's head lifted at the word, husband. The tension in his shoulders shifted uncertain. Caleb's grin faltered. "You mean your temporary husband? The one who's been obsessed with you since before you even met?" The crowd around them began to hush. Madison's voice didn't waver. "I know everything, Caleb. I've seen the journal, the receipts, and I know who really paid you to leave me." Caleb paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." $5 million, she said calmly. "Deposited by Richard Prescott into an offshore account. Your price for humiliation." Gasps rippled around them. Caleb tried to recover. "You're making a mistake. Logan isn't who you think he is." "No," she said, turning to Logan. "He's more—" Logan's breath hitched. Madison's voice lowered. "We need to talk. Somewhere private." Logan nodded once. He extended his hand, not as a Prescott, but as himself. She took it. They stepped out into the museum's rooftop garden, where fairy lights glittered over potted trees, and the city stretched beyond them. Madison turned to him, uncertain where to begin. "Your father came to see me," she said. Logan's face clouded. "Whatever he told you." "He showed me your journal." Silence. "And he told me the truth about Caleb, that he was paid to leave, by your father, not you." Logan's shoulders slumped. "I didn't know." Madison stepped closer. "I also know about the investigator, and the gallery shows, and how you've been watching my work for years." "I was scared," Logan admitted. "Scared that if I told you I'd ruin the image of me, you were just starting to trust. I didn't want you to see me as someone who lurked in the shadows." She blinked back tears. Not anymore. I should have told you everything from the beginning." "Yes, but you didn't manipulate me. You didn't try to own me. You tried to protect me, even if it was messy." His voice cracked. "Do you still want space?" She shook her head slowly. "No. I want answers. I want honesty. And I want you." He stepped forward, emotion raw in his eyes. "You're not my brother's cast-off. You're the woman I've loved from afar, who I never thought I'd be brave enough to touch." She touched his cheek, her hand trembling. "You were always brave, Logan. You just didn't know it." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Too soon, he asked, his voice hopeful and broken all at once. "I think she said it's just in time." Inside was a ring. Her original black sapphire reset in a new design. Elegant, understated, deep. "A new beginning," he said, "built on truth. No arrangements, no contracts, just us." She smiled through tears. "Ask me again." He knelt. Not for show, not for the press, but because he wanted to. "Madison Grace Blake, will you marry me, truly this time?" She pulled him up and kissed him, and the city for the first time in weeks disappeared around them. It had been 2 weeks since that rooftop kiss, since the truth laid bare had finally set them free. Now, in the glow of a soft autumn morning, Logan and Madison sat side by side in a sleek black town car as it wound its way through midtown traffic. She wore a tailored navy coat over a cream blouse, her hand clasped tightly around his. Logan, in a sharp gray suit, stared straight ahead, but his grip on her never loosened. "You okay?" he asked without looking at her. She exhaled. "I'm not nervous about us, just the rest of the world." Today was the interview, the one that would change everything. The scandal had broken like a storm in the tabloids. Billionaire obsessed with brother's fiancée. The headlines screamed across gossip sites. Edited emails from Logan's assistant to a private investigator had been leaked. Sophia, Logan's ex, had finally made her move. The story twisted everything from his quiet admiration into calculated stalking, from a rescue at the altar into an elaborate long con. And Madison painted as either the clueless pawn or worse, the social climbing opportunist. The worst part, some people believed it, but not her. Not anymore. So they agreed no lawyers, no spin. Just the truth. Together. The interview studio was bright, minimal, tasteful. A morning talk show that reached millions. The host, a well-known anchor with a compassionate smile, greeted them as the cameras started rolling. "I'm here today with Logan and Madison Prescott," she began, a couple who became the center of a viral firestorm, first for a wedding that shocked New York society, and more recently for a controversy that raised questions about obsession, manipulation, and secrets. Logan leaned forward. "I'd like to start by clearing something up." The host nodded. "Go ahead." "I never stalked Madison," he said, voice steady. "Yes, I saw her art years ago, under a pseudonym. It moved me deeply. I followed her career. I supported her shows anonymously. But I never interfered with her life, her choices, or her relationships." The host turned to Madison. "When did you find out?" Madison smiled gently. "After we married, I was hurt at first. It felt like a betrayal. But when I saw his journal, his words going back years, written when no one was looking, I realized it wasn't obsession. It was admiration. From a man who never thought he was allowed to speak it out loud." "And the investigator?" the host asked. Logan inhaled. "After Madison and Caleb got engaged, I feared Caleb would hurt her. I wanted to know if she was safe. That was a mistake. I see that now. But I swear it came from concern, not control." Madison reached over, lacing her fingers with his. "Sometimes the line between fear and love gets blurred," she said. "But I believe actions speak louder than rumors. And Logan has done nothing but protect me, support me, and show me more respect than I ever received from the man I was supposed to marry." There was a pause, the kind that lingers before a tide turns. Then the host smiled. "Tell us what's next for you two." Madison beamed. "We're opening a gallery, not just any gallery, one that showcases artists from overlooked communities, people with vision but no platform. We want to give them a voice." "And what's it called?" Madison hesitated. This part hadn't been planned. Logan turned to her, eyes soft. "The Thompson Gallery." Her breath caught. That was her grandmother's name, the one who raised her, who first placed a brush in her hand. Tears welled in her eyes. "You named it after her." He nodded. "It was always yours." The camera cut to a close-up, her hand in his eyes shining with gratitude and love. By the time the interview aired, the storm had shifted. People flooded the gallery's website. Donations poured in. Interview requests multiplied. And for once the headlines changed, from scandal to sanctuary. The couple turning art into healing. Sophia, facing public backlash and legal pressure, disappeared from their lives completely. And Caleb, he moved to London, where his father had banished him to the European division of Prescott Holdings. Far from New York, far from Madison. Peace at last. 2 weeks later, the gallery doors opened for the first time. The soft launch was private, just close friends, a few mentors, and the artists themselves. Madison stood in the entryway in a simple black dress, scanning the room. Art from 15 emerging creators filled the walls. Bold strokes, vulnerable stories, cultures and histories stitched into canvas and sculpture. She turned to Logan, who stood by her side in an open-collared shirt and that signature steel-gray stare. "You did this," he whispered. "No," she corrected. "We did." They moved through the crowd hand in hand, receiving hugs and congratulations. Logan stayed by her side, not to shield her, but to support her. When the evening began to wind down, he led her toward a smaller room at the back of the gallery, one he had kept locked for weeks. "I have one more surprise," he said. He opened the door. Inside, the lights bathed a single wall, filled with her art arranged chronologically, from her first high school charcoal sketches to her award-winning abstracts. And in the center behind glass, her grandmother's old paint-stained palette and brushes. Madison stepped forward, heart in her throat. He stepped beside her. "Your journey, your story. I wanted people to see the artist behind the gallery, not just the name." And then, on the far wall, she saw it. A canvas she didn't remember Logan taking. A piece she'd made in the Lakehouse studio. One she'd thought too raw to share. Blue streaks of emotion, golden veins of hope, brushstrokes soaked in vulnerability. Beside it, Logan's own piece. Midnight blue and brilliant gold, just like the one that hung in the Lakehouse. "Our beginning," he said softly. Madison turned to him, eyes filled with emotion. "You kept everything." He pulled her gently into his arms. "I'll always keep you." And this time, the kiss wasn't about saving face or calming storms. It was about home. 6 weeks later, the Thompson Gallery opened its doors to the public on a warm spring evening in Chelsea. Outside, fairy lights draped across the brick facade swayed gently in the breeze. Inside, the industrial space pulsed with anticipation. Critics, collectors, philanthropists, and young art lovers packed the newly renovated gallery, their voices echoing under the high ceilings. Madison stood in the center of it all, wearing a gown the exact shade of midnight blue as the brushstrokes from Logan's painting, the one she'd made him promise to hang in the back room. She smiled as she greeted guests, her fingers unconsciously twisting her grandmother's pearl earrings, a grounding ritual she hadn't outgrown. But tonight she didn't feel like the girl who had been abandoned at the altar. She felt like the woman who had built something from the ashes. The gallery itself was a reflection of her vision, raw, inviting, emotionally honest. Each piece was chosen not just for technique, but for heart. Works from artists who had never before seen their names printed on a gallery wall now hung proudly beneath bright white spotlights. Some were Haitian, some Bronx-born, some came from group homes, refugee camps, or low-income high schools. Each voice unique, each story powerful. And the city was listening. Logan appeared beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. His presence, as always, was quiet and grounding. He wore a navy suit with an open collar, no tie. Casual elegance that fit him like truth. "You haven't stopped moving," he said with a soft smile, offering her a glass. "I know," she replied, exhaling. "I can't believe this is real." He looked around. "It's more than real. It's important." Just then, Lily swept over in a burst of energy, her pixie cut tousled, and her arms flailing with excitement. "People are crying in the sculpture room," she whispered. "You broke a hedge fund guy." "I saw actual tears, Madison." Madison laughed. "You're kidding." "Dead serious." "And the Met curator. She asked if you'd consider a solo exhibition in October." Madison's jaw dropped. Logan leaned in with a teasing grin. "Told you." By the end of the night, 17 pieces had sold, and not one of them was Madison's, because she hadn't put any of her own work up for sale. Not yet. This space was for others first. But in the private exhibition room at the back of the gallery, one few had seen tonight, hung the most personal work of all. Her artistic evolution lined one wall, a story told in the paint childhood sketches. Early abstract experiments, college studies, and the pieces she'd created in the weeks after the wedding, dark, aching, alive. In the center stood a glass case holding her grandmother's brushes and paint palette. Beside that, her lakehouse canvas, the stormy one, with deep blue chaos and streaks of radiant gold. Across from it, Logan's matching piece. 2 artworks from 2 artists, mirroring one another, mourning, searching, healing, together. Later, long after the final guest had left and Lily had vanished into the night with leftover wine and compliments to spare, Madison and Logan stood outside the gallery beneath the soft glow of the streetlights. She slipped off her heels and carried them in one hand. "My feet are dying." "I offered to get you flats," he reminded her. "And you were going to buy me orthopedic shoes." "We're not there yet, Logan." He laughed. "Fine. I'll wait until year 5. They walked the quiet streets of Chelsea hand in hand. No paparazzi, no noise. Just 2 people who had somehow found their way back to each other. Madison stopped suddenly in front of a little corner cafe. "You know what today is?" she asked. He arched a brow. "I'm afraid to answer." She turned to him, fully barefoot on the concrete, her eyes steady. 3 months ago, I was supposed to marry Caleb." He stiffened. She placed a hand on his chest. "And now, I'm standing here with you, holding hands, running a gallery, falling asleep next to a man who knows me better than I've ever known myself." His breath caught. "I thought you'd forgotten the date," he said quietly. "I didn't," she replied. "I just decided it doesn't define me anymore." They stood there for a long beat, the weight of everything they'd survived pressing down and lifting at the same time. Then Logan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. Madison blinked. "Logan?" He opened it slowly. Inside, nestled on silk, was a ring, not a replacement, a transformation. The original sapphire was still at the center, but now it was surrounded by a burst of tiny diamonds in the shape of a blooming flower. Strong, elegant, unapologetically unique. "I reset your original ring," he said, voice soft. "Not to erase what came before, but to honor what we built after." Tears stung her eyes. "I thought I already said yes." He smiled. "I'm asking again. No secrets? No timelines, no contracts, just a choice. She stepped forward, her voice catching. Yes, she whispered. Again, always. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and beneath the glow of the gallery sign, beneath the buzz of a city that had once threatened to swallow her whole, Madison Blake, Prescott kissed the man who had always seen her, even when she couldn't see herself. This wasn't the end of a scandal. It was the beginning of a legacy. The following morning, sunlight spilled across the sheets like liquid gold. The bedroom was filled with the soft rhythm of city sounds, distant horns, the flutter of pigeons on the balcony, and the warm murmur of coffee brewing from the kitchen below. Madison stirred against the pillow, her fingers instinctively reaching out toward the space beside her. Logan was already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching her with that quiet intensity that had always set him apart. A gentle smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You stare like a man who just won the lottery?" She whispered, her voice thick with sleep. "I did," he said, simply brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. She rolled onto her back and lifted her hand, admiring the ring that now sparkled in the morning light. The familiar black sapphire had transformed. It still held the weight of their beginning, but now glowed with the hope of everything that had come after. "I didn't think I'd ever wear this again," she murmured. "At least, not like this." "It's not just a ring," Logan said, sitting up beside her. "It's a reminder that love doesn't always arrive the way we expect it." She turned her head toward him. "No. Sometimes it shows up in a tailored suit with bad timing and a ridiculous proposal at the worst possible moment. And sometimes," he said, leaning down to press a kiss to her collarbone, "that moment becomes the best decision you ever made." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, tangled beneath the soft sheets, the city alive, outside but far away. Eventually, Madison spoke. "I've been thinking," she said, tracing lazy patterns on his bare chest, "about the brownstone. Our first real home," he said with a smile. "The one where you ghosted me for 3 days. I was painting, and also heartbroken." He chuckled. "Fair." She shifted onto her side. "What if we kept it? Not just as a backup, but as ours. I mean, I love the penthouse, but it was always your world, your design. That house. It's scrappy, uneven, a little too small for the both of us, but it has heart and history." Logan nodded slowly, eyes softening. "I want a place that's ours too," he said. "Somewhere we can be just Logan and Madison. Not the Prescotts, not the headlines, just us. Paint on the walls, broken faucets, coffee on the porch." And maybe, she added with a playful smile, someday, a crib in the corner. His breath caught. She watched him carefully. Too soon. He shook his head. "No, not at all." Then, after a beat, "But I get to paint the nursery." Madison grinned. "Only if I get to pick the colors." They laughed together, the sound echoing like a song inside the walls. Later that day, they walked to the brownstone, hand in hand, the spring air warm on their faces. The house still had chipping paint on the porch and a garden overrun with weeds, but to them, it was perfect. It was real. As they stepped inside, Madison paused and looked around. "I want this place to be the heart of everything. Then we'll build from here," Logan said. "Our family, our future, our truth." And as the light filtered through the same windows she had once stood behind, alone, Madison knew with every beat of her heart that their beginning, unexpected, messy, and imperfect, had given rise to something rare. A love built not on fairy tales but on trust. A home forged not from grand gestures but from shared silence and honest truths. A future shaped by choice, not chance. Some love stories begin with sparks. Others begin with silence, with hesitation, with an interrupted vow at the edge of heartbreak. Madison and Logan's story didn't follow the expected script. It began with a betrayal, an impulsive proposal, and a marriage that wasn't born from love, but from rescue, from instinct, from honor. But sometimes it's the stories born from chaos that become the most unshakable. Because while the world watched them through a lens of scandal, what bloomed behind closed doors was something rare, a partnership built on respect, creativity, truth, and choice. Not fantasy, not perfection, but something better. Their love didn't arrive in a rush. It unfolded slowly, between brushstrokes and stormy nights, late-night confessions, and moments of quiet understanding. It endured trials, unspoken truths, and painful revelations. And through it all, they didn't run. They listened. They learned. They stayed. And when the dust finally settled, what remained was not just a marriage, but a shared mission, a gallery, a home, a promise. In a city that never stopped moving, they found their rhythm. Together. So, if you've ever felt like your story was veering off track, if you've been left behind, underestimated, or misunderstood, remember this. The wrong door closing may just be the world making room for the right one to swing open. Because love, real love, isn't just about how it begins. It's about what you build from it. And Madison and Logan, they built something extraordinary. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more soulful stories. Until next time, may your own story be filled with courage, clarity, and a little bit of magic.